For over a century, the world has had one word for what the Mursi do to their lips: mutilation. One word, decided from the outside, repeated in newspapers, in mission reports, in academic papers written by people who spent 3 weeks in the Omo Valley and left thinking they understood everything. The Mursi have a different word for it: beauty. And that difference between those two words and who gets to choose which one applies is what this entire video is about. To most outsiders, it is the first thing they see, and for many, it is the only thing they see. The lip plate of the Mursi woman has become one of the most photographed, most debated, and most misunderstood images in all of cultural documentary photography. Tourists pay to photograph it. Academics argue about it. NGOs have campaigned against it, and the Mursi themselves, the people at the center of all this attention, have largely been left out of the conversation about what it means. So today, we put them back in. The Mursi are a Nilotic pastoralist people living in the Omo Valley of southwestern Ethiopia, one of the most biologically and culturally diverse river systems on the African continent. The Omo River has sustained human life in this region for hundreds of thousands of years. The tribes that call it home, the Mursi, Suri, Hamar, Karo, Dasanech, and others, represent some of the last communities on earth living primarily outside the structures of the modern state. The Mursi numbers somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 people. They are agro-pastoralists. They herd cattle and grow sorghum, moving seasonally between highlands and lowland areas as the rains dictate. Their cattle are not simply livestock, they are currency, status, identity, and the spiritual connection all at once. A man's wealth, his marriageability, his standing in the community, all of it is measured in the cattle. They are also known as formidable warriors. In a region where intertribal conflicts over land, water, and cattle is a constant reality, the Mursi have maintained their territory through a combination of fierce reputation and genuine military organizations. The young Mursi men carry AK-47s as routinely as they carry walking sticks. A reality that shocks visitors but makes perfect sense in a landscape where the next valley holds a rival group and the state offers no reliable protection. This is not a people on the margin of history. This is a people who have written their own history on their own terms in one of the most challenging environments on earth. But we need to talk about the lip plate because it is the core thing, and because the way outsiders have talked about it reveals as much about those outsiders as it does about the Mursi. The practice works like this. When a Mursi girl reaches adolescence, typically around the age of 15 or 16, the lower lip is cut and a small wooden peg is inserted. Over the following months and years, progressively larger discs are used to stretch the lip. By the time she reaches adulthood, the lip is stretched wide enough to hold a clay or a wooden disc that can measure anywhere from a few centimeters to over 20 centimeters in diameter. Not all Mursi women undergo the process. It is not and has never been compulsory. Some choose it, some do not. And the size of the plate is not standardized. It reflects the individual woman's choice and endurance. The plates themselves are often made by the women who wear them. They are decorated, painted, incised with geometric patterns, personalized. They are, in the most literal sense, works of art that the women create for themselves and wear on their own bodies. So, when Europeans explorers and missionaries first encountered the Mursi in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, their response was almost uniformly one of the revolutions. They described the leaflet as mutilation, as barbarism, as evidence the Mursi's distance from civilization. Some early anthropologists offered a theory that became widely repeated. The plates were originally designed to make Mursi women unattractive to slave traders, who would not take disfigured women as slaves. The idea was that the plates were a form of self-protection, an act of collective disfigurement to prevent capture. It is a theory with a certain grim logic. The East African slave trade was real, devastating, and touched many communities across the region. But the Mars themselves, when asked, do not tell this story, and anthropologists who have spent extended time with the community, most notably David Tatton of Oxford University, who has worked with the masses in the 1960s, have found no evidence that this explanation originates from within the culture. It appears to be, once again, an origin myth imposed from outside rather than one that emerged from within. So, what do the Masi actually say about the lip plate? The honest answer is that they say many things, and those things do not always resolve into a single clean explanation, which is exactly what you would expect from a living culture rather than a museum exhibit. Many Masi women describe the lip plate as a debi atugoin, which translates roughly as a thing of beauty. It is aesthetics, it is adornment, it is a Masi equivalent of jewelry or makeup or fashion, the expression of an idea or beauty that is specific to their culture and their gaze. Others connect it to marriageability and social status. A woman with a large, well-made plate was considered desirable, not in spite of it, but because of what it signaled: patience, endurance, craftsmanship, the willingness to undergo difficulty in the pursuit of something valued by the community. Some accounts connect the plates to the cattle economy. Historically, the size of the woman's plate was said to correspond to the number of cattle her family could demand as bride wealth. The larger the plate, the greater the bride price. Whether this was a rigid formula or a loose cultural association varies depending on who you ask and when the question was asked. What is consistent across almost all Masi women's accounts is this: the choice, when it is made, is experienced as their own. It is not described as something done to them. It is described as something they participated in, endured, and ultimately wore the pride. And then came the cameras. The Omo Valley opened to tourism in the early 1980s and 1990s, and the Masi, with their dramatic appearance and their proximity to the main tourist route, became the most photographed tribe in Ethiopia, possibly in all of Africa. So the dynamic that emerged is uncomfortable to examine, but important to understand. Tourists will arrive in Land Cruisers, cameras raised before they had fully stepped out of the vehicle. They will pay a small fee, typically a few bar per photograph, to capture images of massive women with their lip plates. The women will pose, the tourists will leave, the photographs will circulate online in magazines, in coffee table books, in National Geographic spreads, captioned with words like ancient, tribal, vanishing, or primitive. But the Mercy became a spectacle, and the lip plate, their personal aesthetics choices, their cultural expression, became the centerpiece of that spectacle. Some Mercy women adapted to this economy shrewdly. They negotiated, they set their own rates, they refused photographs they did not want taken. They understood the transaction and participated in it on their own terms as much as possible. So others found it dehumanizing, being approached as a photograph rather than a person, being valued for the disc in your lip rather than your name, your family, your knowledge, or your life. And some younger Mercy women began removing their plates, not because of government pressure or NGO campaigns, but because the plates had become so associated with tourist consumption that wearing one felt like performing for an audience that had nothing to do with them. The Mercy today face pressure that have nothing to do with cameras or cultural debates. The Gibe 3 dam, completed in 2016 on the Omo River upstreams from Mercy territory, has dramatically altered the river's flood cycle. The annual floods that deposited rich silt on the Mursi's flood retreat farms. The agricultural system they had relied on for centuries no longer arrive with the same regularity or force. The ecological foundation of their food system has been disrupted by the infrastructure projects they were never consulted about and from which they receive no benefit. Simultaneously, the Ethiopian government has pursued plans to lease large sections of the Lower Omo Valley to commercial sugar plantation on land that Mursi tribe and other communities have farmed for generations. Relocations have been reported, conflicts over land have intensified. So the Mursi are not facing a cultural threat from within. They are facing an economic and political threat from without, from a state that views their land as underdeveloped and their presence on it as an obstacle to modernization. This is a story as old as colonialism. It has simply changed its language. It no longer speaks of civilizing missions. It speaks of development, of investments, of progress. The results for communities like the Mursi often looks remarkably similar. Let us return for a moment to the question that started all of this. Is the lead plate about beauty, power, or resistance? The answer is yes to all three simultaneously, in different proportions depending on the woman, the moment, and the century you are asking about. Beauty because the Mursi people say so. Because the women who wear them describe them as beautiful, create them as art, and wear them as a personal expression. We do not get to overrule that simply because the aesthetics is unfamiliar to us. But for power, because within Mursi society, the plate has historically conferred status. It marked a woman as marriageable, as capable, as worthy of significant bride wealth. It gave her a visible standing in a community where visibility matters. And for resistance, not perhaps in the way the slave trade theory imagined, but in a quieter, more enduring way. There is resistance of people who have been told for over centuries that their practices are primitive, their bodies are spectacles, and their land is available, and who have continued in the face of all that to live according to their own understanding of what is valuable and what is beautiful. So there is a photograph that circulates widely online. A massive man holder her lip plate in place, looking directly into the camera with an expression that resists easy interpretation. She is not smiling for the tourists. She is not performing for the lens. She is simply looking back. That gaze contains everything this video has tried to say. This is not a curiosity. She is not a remnant. She is not a symbol of anything except herself, a woman, in her home, with her own history, her own knowledge, her own understanding of beauty, living in a world that has spent a century trying to define her from the outside. The Mursi women are still in the Omo Valley, still herding cattle, still making their plates, still negotiating with a world that alternately ignores them and overwhelms them. The question was never really about the lip plate. The question was always about who gets to decide what beauty means, who gets to tell the story, and whose voice gets included when the answer is written. Now you know a little more of theirs. Thank you, everyone. And if you find this video captivating, like, share, and subscribe. See you on the next one.